Good evening, I'm Fana Sheh and you're tuning in to AWANI Tonight. The government assures no more MCO despite the surge in COVID-19 cases. And we take a closer look at the wage debate. Should market forces determine minimum wage? That's coming up. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob reiterates that the government will not reinforce any movement control order or declare another emergency despite a surge in COVID-19 infections. Malaysia today recorded over 20,000 new cases. Malaysians, he adds, need to live with COVID-19 and view it as an endemic just like other infectious diseases like the flu and dengue and keep complying with SOPs to keep COVID under control. Meanwhile, he says that the Cabinet has yet to discuss a proposal by the National Recovery Council to reopen the country's borders by March 1st. According to him, the Health Ministry had yet to provide feedback on the proposal for evaluation by the Cabinet. Employers now have another reason to improve their air ventilation system in the office other than COVID-19. They can qualify for tax deductions. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin says that companies that upgrade their office ventilation systems can now qualify for tax deductions under Budget 2022.
He stressed the importance of good ventilation at offices, especially if there is a need to hold physical meetings. Last November, the government extended the eligibility period for the tax benefit till the end of this year. Businesses can claim for tax deductions of up to 300,000 ringgit to cover the cost of renovating and refurbishing business premises so that it complies with current COVID-19 SOPs.
Meanwhile, Khairi reveals that less than 50% of Malays in the country have received their COVID-19 booster dose. He says while the number of booster doses administered daily has increased, more communication to the group is required, especially through social media.
On the other hand, Khairi in a Twitter post revealed that more than 80% of Chinese have received their booster dose, 56% of Indians and nearly half of the Orang Asli population had also received their third jabs. On the percentage in uptake of booster dose according to states, Khairi said Sarawak recorded the highest number at 76.8%, followed by Malacca, Klang Valley, Negeri Sembilan, Penang and Labuan. He underscored increased focus to be given to areas with low COVID-19 booster coverage, especially ahead of the Johor state election.
Malaysia's economy returned to growth in the fourth quarter of last year. According to Bank Negara, GDP rose 3.6% in the October to December period, up from a 4.5% decline in the previous quarter.
Full-year economic performance, meanwhile, expanded 3.1% in 2021, rebounding from the 5.6% drop in 2020, but well below the initial official projection of up to 7.5% expansion. According to Bank Negara Governor Tan Sri Nur Shamsiah Yunus, recovery was expected to continue in line with improved global and domestic demand. Risks, however, remain tilted to the downside, mainly due to COVID-19 developments. Bank Negara is projecting 5.5% to 6.5% growth in 2022.
Commenting on inflation numbers, Tan Sri Nur Shamsiah says Bank Negara expects inflation to remain moderate in 2022, closer to its long-term average, while core inflation is likely to remain modest this year. She says the upward price pressure we are seeing now had mainly been due to supply chain disruptions arising from the pandemic.
While we see recovery in demand amid the reopening of the economy, income growth remains steady and inflation is more of a supply-driven phenomenon. And while inflation is expected to remain high due to the cost factors in the beginning of the year, for the whole of 2022, we expect inflation to remain moderate, closer to its long-term average. There is also continued slack in our economy and job market. So as such, core inflation is still expected to remain modest.
No final decision has been made regarding the special card for undocumented migrants in Sabah. Chief Minister Datuk Sri Haji Noor stresses that foreigner card is still only a proposal. He advised all parties not to jump the gun and said the card was only a recommendation by the technical committee that would be further deliberated by the state government. Hajiji, however, emphasised that the proposal did not involve giving foreigners identification cards, nor citizenship. The state government has proposed two documents, the foreigner card and the foreign worker card, to standardise documentation for all holders of IMM 13, Sijil Banci and the card Burung Burung, previously issued to Philippine nationals, refugees and all legal migrant workers. An update for Umrah pilgrims. No registration is needed for pilgrims to claim compensation if they are affected by the month-long temporary postponement of Umrah travel. They only need to bring their identity cards to any Lembaga Tabung Haji branch to get payments for the losses they incurred.
Minister in charge of Religious Affairs, Dato' Idris Ahmad, said the list of those affected would be provided by the travel agencies that handle their Umrah trips. The government recently said it would pay up to 60% of the losses incurred by pilgrims affected by the postponement. The government also finalised new SOPs for pilgrims that will be enforced beginning Monday. They include mandatory COVID-19 vaccine booster dose and appointing a person in charge from travel agencies to monitor the pilgrims throughout their journey and back.
More in a few minutes, stay tuned. Welcome back. The Human Resources Ministry recently announced that a minimum wage of around 1,500 ringgit a month is expected to be implemented before the end of this year. While some argue that this should be done sooner, others are of the opinion that a simple increase in minimum wage may not be the best solution. Here to discuss some of the issues surrounding the debate is Centre for Market Education CEO Dr. Carmelo Ferlito.
Who are those workers that earn an amount of money that is close or even below the minimum wage? The Ministry of Human Resources says that we are talking about 8.8% of the wage earners. And I have reasons to believe that the bulk of these people would be made of immigrant workers, okay, foreign workers. So this is the first point. So raising the minimum wage means mainly raising the wage of these immigrant workers. The second issue is indeed that some companies may be ready to accept it and others may be not ready to accept the raise. And the third important issue is considering the risk that raising the minimum wage for unskilled workers, because here we are talking mainly of unskilled workers, could constitute an incentive for employers to replace workers with machines. So we need to be very careful if we want to preserve the income of these people, that we don't touch the replacement point between workers and machine.
Carmelo said the determination of minimum wage should be left to market forces. A certain amount of freedom should also be allowed for workers to move between different employers to increase competition.
The best way is not to have a minimum wage fixed by law, but to leave these to the negotiation between employers and employee, so that the wage can arise by by negotiations happening in the market. So obviously, some of the workers don't have a strong power of negotiation, so we need to be sure that there is an adequate framework to allow workers to eventually push for an increase in their salary when they are in the position also in terms of productivity to demand for it. And one of the conditions that I see as the best one is to allow them a certain degree of mobility between different employers. So in this situation, a competition will emerge between employers to get the best workers, and wages could eventually raise as the result of this competition.
On to the international front, Russia has sent more forces to its border with Ukraine and could launch an invasion at any time, says US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. This, he adds, could even happen during the Beijing Winter Olympics.
Simply put, we continue to see very troubling signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border. And as we said before, we're in a window when an invasion could begin at any time. To be clear, that includes during the Olympics. We're continuing to draw down our embassy. We will continue that process. And we've also been very clear that any American citizens who remain in Ukraine should leave now.
Russia and China had showed increased solidarity against the West ahead of the Winter Olympics, and Russia was seen unlikely to make a move that will overshadow China's big moment by triggering a global security crisis during the Olympics. The Games are scheduled to end on February 20th.
Meanwhile, Australians will now need to get a COVID-19 booster shot to be considered fully vaccinated. However, foreign travellers will continue to need only 2 shots to enter the country.
Australia's National Cabinet had endorsed the revised guidance from the country's vaccination advisory group, but said it will be left to individual states to set their own rules on booster mandates. A person's vaccination status will now be considered overdue if they have not received a booster within 6 months of their second dose. Australian officials have made vaccines mandatory only for some frontline workers, but many private businesses, including major corporations, restaurants and retailers, have made inoculations a requirement for entry.
Just in January, 17 sea turtle carcasses were reported to have been found in Terengganu. What's behind this high number of sea turtle deaths? Tonight on Consider This, we ask marine biologist Dr. Uzair Rusli what it means for the future of the species. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and the Astro Awani app. I'm Fana Sheh. Thank you for watching.